How are you getting on?
Good, thanks. I'm on my day off today, so you've gotten me out of bed nice and early this morning.
Well, apologies for that, first off the bat. You're ordinarily based in the Kilpasky unit, St Finbarrs. Has that changed given the requirements that have cropped up elsewhere?
So not at the moment. We're deemed as an essential service, I guess, and we're quite an urgent clinic. So for the moment, we've actually remained open, luckily enough. We've a ginormous waiting list as well, so I think that kind of is holding us open as well, because all these women do need to be seen in a certain time period. So for the moment, we're lucky enough to stay open. So I wouldn't be deeming myself on the more high-risk frontline at the moment. I'm one of the lucky ones, really, who has escaped that so far.
Yeah, it's. Is there a feeling that we've sort of, the curve has very much been flattened? Obviously, Laura, and we're headed very much in the right direction. The death toll continues to creep in, obviously, day by day, and the numbers there are pretty grim. Any sense that we're past the worst of it now, and that you may actually remain as is?
I do think people have been so compliant with all the little rules and regulations that were brought in by the public health and the government throughout the last few weeks. I think that has absolutely helped in flattening the curve. And I think Tony Houlihan mentioned last weekend that he does believe that we are over the worst, but I suppose the worry is when restrictions are lifted that people do still stick to the restrictions that are there. I think that's really important, and I know that Simon Harris did tweet yesterday, I think, that there's only 40 people a day attending hospital services at the moment with COVID-19, so that figure has dropped dramatically from the beginning of the month. I think there was 100 people a day being admitted. So it's staying at home has proven to work. And I suppose as hard as it is for everybody at the moment that are finding it really, really difficult, all these figures are actually, they're outstanding really. And I know the death toll is still rising, and I suppose that unfortunately a lot of those numbers are coming from nursing homes and stuff, and those more vulnerable people in those settings. But for the country as a whole, I think we've done so well, and I do believe that if we do stick with the restrictions, that we have seen the peak already.
Yeah, the toll that it's taking, as you say, on some of the most vulnerable in society is grim, and I'm sure there's going to be we'll reflect on this for quite some time once we get through it. In terms of the numbers as well, Laura, more than a quarter of confirmed coronavirus cases so far have been amongst healthcare workers. How much is that in your mind in terms of any asks that might come down the track?
Yeah, I suppose that is a scary kind of a figure, the fact that these men and women putting themselves on the front line are actually the ones that are the quite high numbers suffering with COVID-19. I suppose that is quite a scary figure for anybody working in the healthcare system and on the front line. I guess we just have to stick with the universal precautions, keep using our PPE, keep washing our hands, and let's hope that my colleagues that I know who are working on the front line inside an ICUs and stuff are safe, and that we do keep using the universal precautions and the washing of the hands. I know that's been drilled into us at the moment, but all these things do work. But I suppose it is a scary figure because all these people on the front line are coming home to friends and family or whoever they're living with, and they still have to come home each evening, and who knows who's in the household living with them. So I suppose it is quite scary for frontline workers, but I think the country as a whole has done so well, and the government and the public health, they brought in the measures, I think, compared to other countries, and they've done it tremendously, I think.
Yeah, we've spoken to a lot of frontline workers over the last couple of weeks. Noelle Healy springs to mind of a couple of weeks ago. She's an anaesthetist and ICU doctor, and obviously her training was actually very appropriate really to what's going on at the minute. But in terms of your own preparation for if or when that call comes, how appropriate is your training and expertise up to this point to swiftly moving over to a different area, or would there be much upskilling required in that?
I suppose it depends on the area that they want you to move to. So each universal precautions and the use of PPE and everything are courses that we go on really regularly. So everybody would be familiar with the use of PPE and how to take off the gloves correctly, how to take off the gown, how to take off the mask and stuff. So when it comes to that, I think I'd be quite skilled in it. Then it depends on what area that you're aligned into. So I suppose I wouldn't be entirely skilled in like ICU, for instance. But like you're an extra pair of hands, and you do have people around you that are experts in that area, and you're there, I guess, to help them with your extra pair of hands, and I think they'd be very thankful for that as well. So it depends on the area, I suppose, that you're put into, and like it could just be an area that people are in just for overnight fluids, that they're a bit dehydrated with COVID-19, and that they're well enough to go home 24 hours later. So people like that I'd be very confident working with, but I suppose if you were thrown into the ICU setting, you would be asking for the more experienced people around you. But again, like we'd be working as a team, so I think any pair of hands in those kind of settings in ICU and stuff, I think everybody would be very grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely, no question about it. We mentioned at the top that you're working in the colposcopy unit in St Finbarrs, and I'd read last night as well that the cervical screening had been postponed for a time, I think maybe up until last weekend. I don't know the current state of play in that, but there are so many stories, I suppose, to be told after this mess is done, but that in itself is tough for a lot of women, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. So that has been paused nearly for 3 or 4 months now from the GP setting. So there will be a huge backlog now of women who are requiring smears. So at the moment in my colposcopy setting, we have about 1,000 people on a waiting list. So we're trying to get through those numbers. So at the moment, because GPs and stuff aren't taking smears, that means that we're not receiving in as many referrals. Now, obviously, we're receiving in referrals for urgent women who are being seen in the GP setting. But your standard routine smear, which would be every 3 years, people aren't having them at the moment. And I think the latest figure is that there's 300,000 women at the moment waiting to have their routine smear. And that's with only the last 2 or 3, 4 months that the whole programme has been paused for. So at the moment we are trying to clear our original waiting list, and now I guess when the whole programme has been unpaused, now these 300,000 people plus who are due their smears, we're going to get a big handful of referrals again coming back into us. So it is going to put pressure on our own colposcopy clinic alone, not to mind the whole cervical check programme once again. Yeah,
one of these offshoots, obviously, of this thing that will play out, I'm sure, over the next while as well. Laura, how are you yourself coping with everything? Obviously, the absence of any proper and full team active sport in your life. How are you managing to cope with that?
Yeah, I guess it is a difficult one. It's not a scenario that any of us have been in before, I guess, and the unknown is really difficult. I'm still trying to keep up my routine training at the moment. So I usually would have trained maybe 5 days a week. So I'm trying to stick with that at the moment and keep it to the days that I would have been training when we were all training collectively. Individual training obviously brings its own challenges. You're trying to keep your times or whatever and beat them the next week. And our managers and our strength and conditioning and hurling coaches have been fantastic. We've been in touch collectively, the bones of once a week. If it's not just for a chat, well then it might be a speaker that's going to talk to us about individual training or something. So at the moment, yeah, it's obviously really difficult, and the unknown of whether GAA and camogie and ladies football are going to be played this year at all, that's another question that is kind of thrown up into the air at the moment.
Yeah, what do you think?
It's a very difficult one. I'm hoping that we will get the opportunity to play. I think it would give a huge lift. Maybe an option for it might be to be played behind closed doors. That might be a better option. I think maybe girls, I know lads and everything, everybody is still training at the moment, so behind closed doors might be a better option than it not actually being played at all, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was an interesting one that's been in the headlines a lot over the last week, but you'd be perfectly comfortable playing behind closed doors?
Yeah, well, I guess we do have to obviously follow the government and the HSE and the public health guidelines. restrictions will be lifted. Now, whether those restrictions start working or not, that's another thing. So maybe if the championship was to go ahead down in the lines of September, October, personally, I wouldn't really have a problem with that if that is the state. Obviously, we do have to keep following the guidelines that are given, and if the guidelines are that, obviously we have heard that there are going to be no mass gatherings for people until August, I think it was, that was announced during the week. So that obviously brings its own thing with sport, but if we were allowed to meet up maybe in the next month or two in groups of 3s or 4s to be training, that will give a huge lift. And if then after that there was to be championship played in September, October, even the televisation of the games, I think, would even give a huge lift to people at home and stuff who are still sitting or still cocooning at that point. So hopefully it is played, but obviously if it's not going to be safe for the players or management or spectators that are allowed to go to it, well then obviously we have to follow those rules and regulations, so then the championship probably wouldn't go ahead.
Yeah, it's tough. Some tough calls ahead, and it'll be as tough with Cork as anybody, because the league final inside, obviously, before all this came crashing down. But I know that's not foremost in your thoughts at the minute. Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you. We'll speak to you again, and keep strong over the coming weeks and months.
Thanks a lot. You too. Mind yourself. Bye.
Thanks a lot. That's Laura Treacy, Cork camogie fullback and all-star as well, and nurse at St. Finbarrs, as mentioned. So you can head along if you want. We're dressed up in our formal gear this morning, myself and Owen, and we will be on Off the Ball over the course of the day in support of our frontline heroes. You can head along to offtheball.com/donate, where we've a GoFundMe page up and running, and the tally continues to grow and grow. So head along there and make a donation and get dressed up in your gear as well. Why wouldn't you? Sure, look how smart we're looking this morning, and share that on social media too. So lots more to come. We're going to be chatting to Mike Carlson very shortly about the latest from the NFL draft, which got underway in Roger Goodell's basement last night. But before that, the O'Donovan brothers in conversation with Nathan on last night's show.